What's up, folks? It's Dr. Remy LeBeau, and I'm coming at you once again from the X-Layer to provide you my very insightful reaction to the brand new Marvel Cinematic Universe movie of our favorite wall crawler, Spider-Man Homecoming is the name of the film. Alright, so it's been actually almost a week since the movie was released. And I have kind of been putting off doing this because I watched the film Thursday night, the preview night, and I liked it, but I also was having some other stuff going on that was kind of distracting me. So I kind of felt distracted when I watched it. And I liked the film, but I didn't love it. And I kind of felt like, okay, well, maybe it was whatever, the stuff going on in my life that was kind of stopping me from really enjoying the film. So I was like, I need to give it another chance before I sit down and throw down my thoughts on it. So I did do that. I did that finally today. I went back and watched it again. And I have to say that, again, I liked it. I liked the film. It's not a bad film whatsoever. And it certainly deserves, the positive critical response that it's getting, the amount of box office that it's earning. It should be popular. It is popular. I'm glad for that. It means we'll get more. I'm really happy about that. Spider-Man deserves to be in the Marvel Universe. The Marvel Universe and Spider-Man are one. They always have been, and this is the way it should be. Homecoming, very appropriate title. It's like he's coming home. The character's coming home to where he belongs with the rest of the Marvel Universe. So that's all fine and dandy. So why I didn't love the film. So I really wanted to figure this out today, and so I really tried to pay attention to what it was, and I think ultimately what it is for me is, it kind of feels like a pocket Spider-Man tale, which is fine, like a kind of like a sidelined tale where it's like Spider-Man gets his little story in this pocket of the Marvel Universe. And I think the intention behind that was to really solidify his place within the Marvel Universe. I mean, the story was very much about the Marvel Universe, right? Like the Chitauri attack left some technology that led to Adrian Toomes, incorporating the technology into weapons, which he sells, and then the whole thing, and then it all comes from the Marvel Universe, from the Chitauri attack. It's all very connected. Everything that's going on with Peter has everything to do with his experience with the Avengers. So it's very much like an Avengers tale told on the sidelines, with Spidey now being introduced into the world, and kind of, again, him kind of dealing with the next stage of his life, given what happened to him in Captain America Civil War. So all that, it was super captivating and awesome and great to see, and I really enjoyed it. But again, it didn't feel like the main event. It didn't feel like that, which is generally the case with standalone Marvel films, except for the Guardians films, and also I think the Captain America films, like the Winter Soldier and Civil War. Those didn't really feel like that. The Thor films, I like the second Thor film, and that kind of felt a little bit epic to me, but not on the scale that it could have been. Doctor Strange felt very side cool. Ant-Man felt very side cool. Black Panther doesn't seem to maybe have that quality. I feel like it's going to be more of like an event where it's like the world of Wakanda and all these beautiful characters are introduced, and it's just, I think the whole thing is going to be super captivating. But this Spidey film, it just didn't feel like the main event. Like if you just go back to the original Spider-Man trilogy that started in 2000 with that Sam Raimi directed, those movies felt like events. They felt like And it wasn't just like the movies themselves. It was like the experience of watching them, like going through the adventure. It really felt like it had a lot of weight. This did not feel that way. Again, it kind of felt like a small chapter in Peter's life post the experience that he had, which is fine. And that's maybe ultimately what kind of, again, left me liking it but not loving it. There were some interesting aspects as far as like the overall construction of the story and the way in which Peter's life is being presented from a business standpoint in relation to like the history of the character recently. So like the way I see it is like this version of Peter is sort of an amalgam of the Ultimate Spider-Man story, which is the Miles Morales story, where he has his friend Genki, who's essentially now Ned Leeds. And also the Superior Spider-Man story, which has completely changed the nature of Spider-Man in the comic books. This is something that happened about 2 or 3 years ago, maybe a little bit more, maybe like 5 years ago now, where what happened was Dr. Octopus was dying, and he transferred his consciousness into Peter, taking over Peter's life. Peter, his memories were still there, and so Doc Ock did remember everything that Peter had experienced in his life, but Peter himself was no longer in control. I think it was implied that he had been transferred to Doc Ock's dying body and he had died. Anyway, the story went on for like a year. Doc Ock was living Peter's life for a year, and because he had his memories, he took on like the sense of responsibility that Peter that drives Peter, right? With great power comes great responsibility, like the whole Uncle Ben thing, like that actually affected Doc Ock. And so he actually continued being Spider-Man and continued being heroic, but he like changed the nature of Spider-Man from being just like, street level type of hero who, kind of just has limited resources. I did come up with webbing and the web shooters and the costume, but really that was it. Doc Ock elevated the Spider-Man game. It became very like technological. There were a lot more technologically intricate elements incorporated into the suit, and then ultimately Peter wound up becoming like the owner of a big corporation, Parker Industries, due to a bunch of inventions that Doc Ock had patented and I guess were being mass produced. Anyway, that whole story kind of eventually was resolved, but like this elevation of Peter's life to a more sophisticated version of Spider-Man didn't really, like, we still kind of see it resonating in the current stories in the comics, and so you have this very different version of Spider-Man now than you had maybe like in the 90s and even certainly back in the 60s. And so I feel like even though they couldn't do this whole Superior Spider-Man story because that would be ridiculous and would totally turn off audiences, this incorporation of like this very technologically advanced spider suit into Peter's repertoire was a way of sort of evoking the Superior Spider-Man in the film. So like that was mixed in with like old kind of high school Peter, also with some of the Ultimate Spider-Man stuff, and it was kind of like a Spider-Man soup, and it worked. It tasted really good. It just didn't taste amazing. Like, yes, this is the movie I've been waiting for. But I mean, obviously having Spider-Man in the Marvel Universe is really exciting. But that excitement was really, it was really captured most when Civil War came out, because that's the first time we saw Spidey in that world, and we really saw him interact in the most intricate way possible within the Marvel Universe with all those characters in that airport sequence, which was the best sequence I've ever seen in anything. And I'll stand by that until Avengers Infinity War, probably. Yeah, so that the excitement like had already kind of happened, and I'm definitely still excited about it. I really love that Spidey's in it, but but you know, like it definitely just the nature of why we had to have Spidey in this universe now in the way that he was introduced, due to like Sony and like and Disney working out a deal where they kind of share Spidey, and like Sony does the distribution for the film. I'm going to assume that Sony's going to get most of the revenue from these films, and like any films that he appears in the Marvel universe proper, like in Avengers Infinity War and in Civil War, like they probably don't get anything from that, or maybe they get a very small slice. I'm assuming that's how the contract works. I don't know. But you definitely feel like that this is not completely a Marvel film. Like it feels like there's other hands in there. Anyway, like the whole take on this film was more of a kind of like a high school coming of age type of thing, kind of like a Breakfast Club meets the superhero genre, and that to a large extent that worked and it played out well. But from what I've heard, Sony wanted to make it more of a classic action film, and so you saw that as well. And like, and even though the film had a really smooth flow to it, I do feel that it did somewhat. It was somewhat hurt by that, because I feel like the attempts to make it a more like a traditional action superhero film, maybe felt a little bit shoehorned in there a little bit, but maybe not really. I'm splitting hairs here. Ultimately, I think another reason why it didn't sit perfectly with me was because it was like very high school centric, which, you know, obviously I'm a man of a particular age and I'm way past that stage now. And I definitely do not identify with someone at that stage in their life anymore. But of course I empathize with it. I've gone through it and I can appreciate it. And I definitely appreciate the way it played out in the film. It's just, for me, like viscerally, it doesn't hit anymore like that. But I get that, and like we need that. We need to have that. Like the new generation does need to have characters in the Marvel universe they can identify with. You know, characters that are going through things they're going through, exams, dances, liking friends, etc. You know, liking girls, guys, and kind of that whole thing that happens in high school. And I get that it has to happen, and I like that it played out the way it did. But it did again, kind of, because it's sort of like this soup of like all these like Spider-Man elements. Again, it just didn't quite feel like, I don't know. It didn't quite feel like, it didn't have the magic of the original Spider-Man films, but that's fine. It doesn't have to. And I'm sure there's a lot more good stuff coming. And I'm by no means am I saying I did not like the film. I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. And I'm happy to have seen it. Yeah. Overall, the filmmaking was really good. There were another thing that maybe made me feel like things were a little bit too Sony-fied was there was a lot of darkness in the film, like a lot of sequences at night, and even some sequences like the airplane sequence with the Vulture, like. There was times where like the action kind of felt like I don't really know what's going on here. Like it didn't feel clear. Like there were things being represented that weren't as crisp as they usually are in Marvel films. Again, I may just be splitting hairs, but I did kind of notice that. But it wasn't, again, like a big hindrance. Overall, I really enjoyed it. Like I really enjoyed like the jokey nature of a lot of it. And it definitely did that right. Whereas if you go back to the last Spider-Man film, Amazing Spider-Man 2, where they did like the Jamie Foxx like weird kind of goofy character thing where he like becomes Electro after being like this like super nerdy janitor, or I forgot what he was. It was just so stupid. And like that, like those kind of things did not work, and they felt very like contrived and very not well thought out, very like just obviously referencing other things. But the stuff in this film felt very fresh. It felt organic. It didn't feel forced whatsoever. So all that worked. So again, most things worked. The acting worked. I like all of the characters. The Adrian Toomes thing, I like it. I understand there have to be more updated versions of characters, but it didn't quite feel like Vulture. But that's fine. It doesn't have to be the classic Vulture, like this billionaire guy who like is old and wears this Vulture outfit, and you know, it's like it's I like the whole damage control thing, the whole, you know, him, like I like that whole story of like why he did the things that he did, the motivations, and how situated those motivations were in the overall Marvel Universe lore. I thought that was really good. I thought that was really well done, and it really served the film well. So again, like I can't criticize the film and say, oh, this is a bad film. Most elements worked. It was very enjoyable. It was fun. I look forward to seeing more. I was happy to see it again today. But again, like not my favorite of the Marvel films, and definitely not my favorite Spider-Man film. Anyway, those are my overall thoughts on the film. Chime in below. Let me know what you think about the film. Even though everybody's already pretty much expressed their thoughts online. But whatever. Anyway, thanks for checking out my video. If you haven't already done so, you can subscribe down there. And as always, I'd like to remind you, if you haven't already, put an X in that box. Because, ladies and gentlemen, ain't nobody checking me. Take care. Bye-bye.